This is Leader Time by FedNet, your podcast source for floor remarks by Senate Republican leader John Thune and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. On June 11th, Thune discussed stablecoins and advocating for the Genius Act to provide regulatory clarity, enhance national security, support the U.S. dollar, and ensure continued leadership in financial innovation. The Senate held initial procedural votes on the bill hours later. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, a significant number of Americans are engaging with cryptocurrency. That includes Americans who use stablecoins. And then there are the individuals and businesses around the world that access the American dollar through the use of dollar-backed stablecoins. Mr. President, stablecoins are a relatively recent financial innovation, but they've quickly caught on. They offer easy payments with the speed and security of the blockchain and the stability and usability of the dollar bill. There are roughly $250 billion of them now in circulation. Traditional financial institutions are said to be considering getting into the stablecoin business. And companies like Uber and Airbnb are reportedly exploring integrating them into their businesses. Mr. President, it's clear that cryptocurrency is here to stay. And it's time that we bring it into the mainstream. Passing the Genius Act is a good first step. The Genius Act would provide a clear regulatory framework for stablecoins. It would ensure Americans can trust who they're doing business with when they purchase stablecoins, allowing the American people to exercise financial freedom with confidence. The Genius Act would also protect against threats to our national security and from criminal activity. It would require stablecoin issuers to uphold the same standards as other financial institutions to monitor and report suspicious activity, comply with U.S. sanctions, and block illicit transactions. Plus, the vast majority of stablecoins are backed by the U.S. dollar, which means this bill will create demand for the U.S. dollar and U.S. treasuries, something that is good both for our national security and our fiscal house. It's yet another reason why we should want stablecoins to be made in America. Mr. President, the Genius Act represents the bipartisan consensus on clear rules of the road for this new financial innovation. Today, stablecoin issuers are operating in a legal gray zone. Companies that want to follow the rules can't be sure what rules to follow. And the Biden administration didn't help matters with its numerous lawsuits, which left many U.S.-based companies contemplating moving out of the United States altogether. Mr. President, we want America to lead in financial innovation. We want to bring cryptocurrency into the mainstream, and the Genius Act will help us do that. Mr. President, it's time to pass this bill. The version of the Genius Act that we will invoke cloture on today reflects months of hard work and negotiations from members on both sides of the aisle. It's a good product that, as I said, represents the bipartisan consensus on the way forward. And I appreciate the leadership of Senators Hagerty and Lummis and Chairman Tim Scott in getting the Genius Act to this point. It's been a long haul. It began in March with a 3-hour markup in the Banking Committee, where senators considered 40 different amendments to this bill. It ultimately passed out of the committee by a vote of 18-6. Before we began floor debate, negotiations on the bill continued, and a number of changes were made to the bill, most of them to accommodate demands from Democrats, while maintaining the full-throated support of the administration. 3 weeks after the bill finally came to the floor, Mr. President, it's time to move forward and pass this legislation. I hope that we'll see another strong bipartisan vote on the Genius Act later today and in the coming days as we conclude our work. And I hope that the House will quickly take up this bill and send it to the President, who is eager to sign this legislation. Mr. President, as I said last month at the beginning of the floor process, the Genius Act will not be the last word on crypto legislation. There's more work to be done, including on market structure legislation. I know our colleagues have already begun work in that area as well. This remains a priority for many in our conference, and it is the next logical step in making the United States the crypto capital of the world. And I'm looking forward, Mr. President, to continued progress on bringing cryptocurrency into the mainstream and securing American leadership in financial innovation. Mr. President, digital assets are the future, and we're working to ensure that future is one where America leads.
Schumer criticized President Trump for having deployed U.S. troops to a Los Angeles protest, condemned the budget bill for slashing Medicaid and clean energy tax credits, and urged rejection of Trump's IRS nominee over corruption and lack of qualifications,
Mr. President, Donald Trump's order mobilizing U.S. troops to an American city sets a dangerous precedent for our civil liberties. As I've said, violence is not the way to achieve justice. Freedom of speech is fundamental, but it must be exercised peacefully and lawfully, and the vast majority of protests, the overwhelming majority of protests, have been peaceful, and they're exercising their American right, their privilege, to peacefully protest. That's been with our country since its founding. But sending troops to an American city against the wishes of local officials is outrageous, unnecessary, and reeks of authoritarianism. That's what authoritarian countries do. Using troops on U.S. soil should only ever be used as an absolute last resort. The last time it happened without state consent was 60 years ago to protect civil rights heroes. What Donald Trump is doing, rather, is spoiling for a fight. He wants chaos. He'd love any excuse to divert attention. And doing it this way he does it all the time. This is one of the most shameful, awful ways you can do it. Our troops don't deserve to be exploited in this way, to be used in pawns in a nakedly political fight. It's a deep disservice to them and to all service members and law enforcement who serve our country and protect our community. And why is Donald Trump doing this? To divert attention. He knows that his big, ugly bill is highly unpopular with the American people. The more they learn about it, the more they hate it. He knows he's got big trouble in his fight with his erstwhile friend Musk. He knows that the tariffs are hurting the American people, so he seeks to divert attention. That's his M.O. But what it does is create chaos. And the American people don't like chaos. And so I urge the President to immediately reverse course at once, remove all of the troops and the Marines, and let local law enforcement do their jobs to keep the peace, as the governor of California and the mayor of Los Angeles said they're perfectly capable of doing. On reconciliation, when Republican congressmen went home after voting for their big, beautiful bill, they got a lot of flack from people back home because the more Americans look at this big, quote, beautiful bill, the more they realize it's an ugly mess. By now, we've heard from so many Republicans in the House saying they didn't like this provision, they didn't like that portion of the bill. Some say it cuts Medicaid too deep. Some say it adds too much to the debt. Some say they didn't even get to read the bill. And particularly the energy provisions, the clean energy provisions, very popular, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, reducing our dependence on China, was done in the dark of night at the last minute. So it virtually kills the clean energy tax credits that have been so popular in this country. The bottom line is this, though. A congressman's core power is the power to vote. That's what the Constitution gave them. And House Republicans who say they don't like the bill should exercise that power today. They have a unique opportunity to make the very changes they've been talking about for weeks. Because of technical mistakes that we Democrats pointed out, the Republicans had to take their bill back and not send it over here until they make those technical corrections. But if even a handful of Republican congressmen who say they don't like this provision or that provision vote no until those other provisions, those much more serious provisions, are changed, they could get it done. They could stop the vicious cuts to Medicaid. They could stop the closures of rural hospitals. They could restore the clean energy tax credits and save jobs in their own district. Remember, at least 70% of those clean energy projects are in red states. Whatever policy they told the people back home they didn't like, they can now change it. It's a golden opportunity. If House Republicans mean what they say, those who say they don't like the bill, this part of it or that part of it, if they truly want to change the bill, now this is their chance. This is the golden key, Republicans in the House. You have a chance, a real chance to change the bill. It's in your hands. But don't go home and tell your constituents, oh, you're really against this provision if you don't act on it. The vote will show whether House Republicans are worried about the cuts to SNAP, to Medicaid, to Medicare, to clean energy jobs like they claim, or if it was just empty talk. House Republicans, vote no, and you can change the bill for the better. But if you go along and vote yes, after all that complaining, you'll show people back home that when push comes to shove, you'll cave to Donald Trump. On climate, this week, Republicans continued their tortured efforts to ram Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill through the Senate. Now, some Senate Republicans are starting to balk at the fact that their bill is a clean job killer. It virtually ends all of the tax credits that we gave to wind, solar, and other clean energy. If Senate Republicans have any desire to lower energy costs, avoid shipping energy jobs overseas, they should hit the eject button on this big, beautiful bill and start over. Experts from across the political spectrum are starting to agree that Donald Trump's bill is far too radical and deeply flawed, and to boot, it was passed in the dark of night, where even many Republicans didn't know what's in it, and a few even admitted that publicly. On jobs, their bill would kill over 800,000 good-paying clean energy jobs by 2030 alone. That would be a disaster for the economy, just as clean energy is taking off. These jobs will last for generations. Clean energy tax credits made them possible, and 85% of the investment generated by these credits have gone to red states. Did you hear that, Republican colleagues? If Republicans proceed with the bill, they'll put Americans out of work in their own states. And the American people, and these workers in particular, are starting to see it. Just last week, a battery plant in South Carolina paused a $1 billion project because of policy uncertainty. In other words, because of Republican sabotage. And the closure in South Carolina is a canary in the coal mine if there ever was one. If Donald Trump's bill passes, more jobs disappear. And talk about costs. It's going to add $32 billion on household energy costs. And today we got the news that Donald Trump's bill is worse than we thought. Americans will now pay up to $170 billion, not $32 billion more on energy. Let me say that again, $170 billion more for the American consumer to pay on electric bills, for small business to pay on electric bills. Republicans, because they just want to so embrace the radical anti-clean energy fossil fuels group, that they'll raise Americans' costs by a dramatic amount. They also make us dependent on China. China's gaining in solar energy. If we cut it off, China will dominate the world, and our children and grandchildren will be at China's behest. It'll push about $80 billion in solar and battery manufacturing jobs overseas. More jobs in Chengdu, fewer in Cleveland and Charleston. We all know that AI and crypto are going to cause American energy demand to spike in the coming years. Why the heck would you cut off one of the sources? There are many who say all of the above. Okay. But why cut off one part of that all of the above? Because the radicals, not the mainstream, but the radicals in the fossil fuel industry are almost religious in their hatred of clean energy because they know it's the future and will eventually displace them. On the IRS nomination, and that's why this week I have been working 24/7 with so many different people, whether it's workers or companies or governors, to spread the word how bad this is and ask all of America, if you don't like these provisions, if you think it'll lose your job, if you think it'll raise your costs, call your Republican senator and tell him to change it. Most of the Republicans didn't like it to begin with, but it was rushed through in the dark of night. Finally, on the IRS nomination, Mr. Long at the IRS would be a gut punch to the American taxpayer. It's clear that anyone with a pulse, that Long was only suggested to run the IRS because of his longtime fealty to Trump. We all know that Donald Trump prioritizes loyalty over experience. But even by the president's standards, Long is a shockingly bad nominee. Ideally, at the very least, you want the person in charge of collecting federal taxes to be independent, qualified, and free of scandal. When it comes to independent, qualified, and free of scandal, Long is 0 for 3. He is neither independent, nor qualified, nor clean from scandal. His only quality of the job is his fealty to Donald Trump. During his time in Congress, Long didn't amass any credible tax experience. He didn't serve on the Ways and Means Committee, never authored a single original piece of legislation, and instead advocated for the IRS to investigate his political opponents. And after leaving Congress, Long lined his pocket in the tax scam industry, where he peddled fake tax credits and took advantage of small businesses. The American people don't want the IRS to be run by a tax cheat. They don't want the IRS to be motivated by politics. They don't want an IRS that looks out only for the ultra-wealthy, so the Senate should reject Mr. Long's nominations. I yield the floor and thank Leader Thune for his courtesy in letting me go ahead of him.
Thanks as always for listening. This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited.